Well, it's time now for our Entre Nous segment, and we're going to focus on this story a bit more. Obviously, all this political turmoil here in France, which is heating up the parliament. Lots of suspense over Michel Barnier and if his government will be subject to this no confidence vote. Now, this could occur if he decides to use something called the 49.3 or the 49.3. Now, this is an infamous way to push through policies, and Solange Moujane joins me on set to talk a bit more about what exactly this constitutional article is. Tell us.
Well, the 49.3 or the 49.3 is an article in the French Constitution. It is often pegged somewhat of a legislative nuclear weapon because it is a way for the government to pass their bills without the okay of Parliament. And it allows the Prime Minister to push through legislation by force, or to essentially say to the members of Parliament, you don't like my proposed law or budget, I'm going to make it a law anyway without your votes. But the 49.3 also puts the government into potentially precarious, tight spot because Parliament can in turn move to cancel that law by voting the government out. I'll explain this part of it in a moment, this motion de censure or vote of no confidence. But first, the 49.3. Now, critics of it say that it is a brutal denial of democracy, that doesn't take into account the views of elected MPs, that it gives too much power to the executive or the president, who generally, but not always, has named a prime minister that will implement his or her policy. But others say that the 49.3 is a very necessary tool, even if it should be used sparingly. They say that it is a means of ending and concluding things when there is political deadlock, that it is a last resort solution. That ensures things get done and that democracy continues to move forward with new policies and budgets, regardless of whether the bills are liked by all.
And I think it is very safe to say that this article is very controversial.
It is. Perhaps the most famous and talked about and potentially disliked article of the French Constitution. And on the whole, it is highly disliked by the French people. An October poll by a lab found that 58% of French people think it is unacceptable for Michel Barnier to use it for his budget, while 31% said that it could be used if parliamentary debate goes on too long. Overall, its use does erode how voters view the power or the lack of power that elected officials have. Now, the 49.3 is the section of the Constitution that defines the relationship between the Prime Minister and his or her ministers with Parliament, which is composed in France of the Senate and the National Assembly, or l'Assemblée nationale. And it was written into the Constitution in 1958, and it was also amended in 2008 to stipulate that it can only be used once per parliamentary session. So that's actually quite rare. But there is an exception here for budgetary laws or laws of finance, such as France's social security budget and healthcare system.
All right, so what keeps the prime minister and the government from actually using it for every single thing that is financial in that case?
Well, it is. The 49.3 is actually has become quite common and is often used for these financial laws, especially as political views and as parties in France have become more splintered. And this is actually a phenomenon that is splintering occurring across Europe. But back to the 49.3. Elizabeth Borne's government infamously used it 23 times in her year and a half of tenure. To her dismay, some people called her the queen of the 49.3. Now, her record did not reach the number one spot, which you see right there. It is held by Michel Rocard, who used it 28 times in his 3 years. He, too, did not have a majority in Parliament, thus the frequent use of it. Now, when it comes to how and when prime ministers use this tool, there are also differences. It can be used to push through bills quickly, without debate. Some say this is the more aggressive rollout. It can also be used after a whole lot of debate to end deadlock. Some see that as slightly more democratic. There are also prime ministers who've used it to rein in their own political parties when debate goes on for too long, or if there are too many amendments that are causing problems. And then there are times when a bill is so unpopular, say Emmanuel Macron's pension reforms, that the necessary votes, they would never be there, but the government stands by it nonetheless. Such moves, however, run the risk of eroding voters' belief in democracy and its institutions. So the use of the 49.3 remains, regardless of the circumstances, quite unpopular among the French.
Right, but it's being unpopular isn't the only risk that using the 49.3 carries, is it?
No, it also carries the risk that the National Assembly responds to this use of the 49.3 with a vote of no confidence or a measure against the government. after the evoking of 49.3. And in the political turmoil that is currently hitting France, this is a very real risk. Some even say it's an inevitability. Now, how does the vote of no confidence work? Well, for this to happen, there needs to be this motion de censure, or vote of no confidence, which is what the far right is now threatening as a potential negotiating tool. But it cannot happen immediately, and it is not the easiest thing to put in motion. If there has been a law that is passed with 49.3, then 10% of MPs, or 58 of them, need to get together to declare within 24 hours of the 49.3 that they are calling a no confidence vote to topple the government and therefore this law. So here MPs have to act quickly and to assess if they have enough votes to potentially pass this motion. Then there needs to be 48 hours between the moment of the request and the actual no confidence vote. So in this case, if a no confidence vote is requested, say today, Monday, the vote wouldn't happen until a Wednesday or Thursday, when Barnier's government could potentially be pushed out. And that is if there is an absolute majority of votes ousting them, or at least 289 votes in favor of this motion. And that remains an if, as it would likely require the far right and the far left to work together. A successful vote of no confidence has actually only happened once in 1962. Charles de Gaulle was president at the time. Georges Pompidou's government was voted out. But both Pompidou and de Gaulle, in the end, they won that political battle, with Pompidou being reinstated after elections. All this to say that it is very rare for a censure vote to pass. But here it very well could pass if it comes about. And that is not a surprise. For Barnier or his government, this threat of no confidence has actually been sort of floating above their heads. You could even argue above Macron's head as well for a long time.
It certainly has. All right, Solange, thank you so much for breaking it down for us. Solange Mougel there with everything you always wanted to know about the 49.3. Thank you so much.